so much for joining me for this week's edition of Soul Call Friday, because everybody has a soul, but not every soul is in their control. Today, we have with us Dani, who's going to share with us what's on her heart and what she wants God to do about it. So, as you know, Soul Call Friday just goes the way the Holy Spirit leads it and the way the conversation takes it. So we have no idea where it's going to go, but I know it's going to be a lot of fun. Hi, Dani. Thank you for joining us. And why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what made you call in today?
Sure. Hi, Dr. Price. Thank you again for having me. I'm super honored, very excited to be here on the show. I think I've seen every broadcast of Soul Call Friday. I was so excited when I saw this roll out because the topics that you're touching with everybody who's been on, I was like, okay, I can pull from that. I can pull from this one. I can pull from, so it's been it's kind of when I saw the banner on the bottom of the screen to say if you're interested to call in, and I felt prompted to do so. So just really, really happy to be here. I'm from Joliet, under Antioch Christian Assembly Church. So big fan.
Yes, wonderful church.
Love where God has placed me. So, and thankful for this connection as well.
But very good. I'm glad that you're here. But what I want to know now is, what is it that you want to open up? But before you answer that, also tell us, what do you want to come from this time today?
Sure. I would love if the Lord would grant some clarity, and I believe some specific direction and understanding. It's sort of like a cultivation as the journey that he's been taking me on. He's done a lot, much in my life. And so right now, the topic that first came to mind was really discovering and discussing and exploring boundaries, especially when it comes to familial boundaries, parents, siblings. For me specifically, a parent that is not and has not been in my life for over 10 years and one that currently is, and so just going through that journey of understanding where my family as a whole has been to where we are now, and to understand those boundaries, where boundaries aren't set up to hurt the other person, nor specifically myself, who is setting them up. Historically, I believe I've looked at boundaries in terms of pushing someone away rather than saying you can only come so far. And so, wanting to understand how do you set that up without it being damaging to the other person, nor to self, and doing that in a godly manner.
Well, I think that is a very interesting subject. And I'll tell you, that probably is one of the most perplexing ones that people have today, especially when you have to deal with boundaries of the saved versus the unsaved family member, or the spouse versus the in-laws and all of that. But what I'd like to do is to have you share with us a little bit about what boundaries do to and for you, and how can you reach back to find out when they became such an issue in your life?
Sure. I think that's a really good question, because I don't quite have an answer as to what they do for me, other than I know they're supposed to offer protection, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they're supposed to offer protection. And you said something so key in one of your last broadcasts. I don't remember who was with, possibly Miss Cheryl, but you said that even if your authority figures are dysfunctional, it does not make you inferior. And that thing stuck out so much. I wrote that down. It's in my phone. So, that, because that has kind of been the crux of how I view myself, and it has inevitably affected those boundaries, not seeing myself as worthy as setting them up. So I do struggle with knowing how to do that. So in terms of what they're supposed to offer me, I know it's supposed to be a sort of protection. I don't have the wholeness of what that looks like.
Well, I will tell you one thing in what you just said, and I just don't want to forget that. But we're going to go back and visit that word protection, because you've used it a number of times. So that means that there is something that a boundary protected you from. And when that boundary was not in place, you felt totally exposed and vulnerable. So I want you to go back. I'm going to ask you to do something very interesting. Paint me a picture of what boundaries look like to you, and then draw me a parallel to let me know what you feel when you think your boundaries don't exist or they're being violated or breached.
Okay. Okay. So the first part, so I have clarity, you're saying paint a picture of what
Yeah.
I think they should look like.
For example, if you wanted our viewers to say, hey, when I say boundaries, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, and even, Dani, this is what I'm recalling.
Okay. Okay. I guess I would answer that by, I believe in terms of like the protection aspect, I believe what it should look like is, no matter what state both parties are in, it should not affect the one who is laying the boundaries. Like there should be a knowledge of knowing when to stop a conversation, how to stop a conversation, when to visit, when to not, that sort of thing. And I guess what happens when I feel like those boundaries have been crossed, I feel used. I feel like there was a term that Holy Spirit gave me the other day, and it was reliant rejection. I feel that there is a reliancy in the relationship and in the dependency, but it's not wanted because it's me. And so if that makes sense. And so I feel like there is some crisscrossing of boundaries when I let that affect me. So I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but I'm trying to explain it. Okay.
Actually, it does, because I want to follow that up. So here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that somewhere in your early years, I'm looking at it's in the area of about 8 to 9 years old, something so violated your privacy and your safety, your space, your safe space, that you made an emotional decision that we do make as children, but you made an emotional resolve. Yours wasn't even a decision, Dani. It was a resolve that when you get older, when I become an adult, no one's ever going to do that again. No one's going to invade my space. No one's going to ignore my preferences, my likes, my dislikes, and no one is going to snatch my attention out of what I want to do if I don't want them to do so. Now, that is what I'm getting. So I want you to walk with me, because I'm looking at this little girl, and this is whoever it is, somebody just burst into your space. It made you feel vulnerable because they demanded something of you that you didn't want to give. And I'm using now, not just you, but I'm going to go now into the area of saying that I need my room. I need you not to burst into my room. I need you not to go through my things. I need you not to ignore my time. I need you to not just enter without knocking on the door. And so nobody cared about your rules, your space rules. You have very strong space rules, personal space rules. Nobody really acknowledged that for you. And as a matter of fact, let you know that you were essentially nobody. So because you were being taken care of, because you weren't an adult, you weren't on your own. But this thing rolled into, so now I'm going to move up a little bit to when you're age 14. So now 14, this thing is real. And I'm saying this to you because I'm just going by what the Holy Spirit is unfolding. And it got to the point that you would go through panic things when people pressed your buttons and when they moved into your boundaries. That thing was a real emotional type of reaction. And the more it made you feel uncomfortable, the more you doubled down on it. Now, it has cost you relationships. It has cost you friendships. It has cost you opportunities, because your soul's well-being took preeminence over all of that. And so right now, at this point, you probably can't say the exact moment or the exact issue that happened, but what you do know is there is a pulse. When that thing starts coming on you, the pounding starts. There's a pulsing, and then you're resolved because you're a strong-willed woman, and you resolve, and this whole machine goes into place. Not because of necessarily always what's happening, but it goes into place because of the reaction, that familiar reaction. And so that vow, no one is going to run roughshod over me again, has stepped in, and it's become a part of your whole personality, not just your persona, what you project, but your personality's safeguards. So we have to get into the self-preservation part of that. Does that speak to you?
Yeah, that I think that self-preservation is very, very accurate. Those panic attacks, they started around age 5, even just well, yeah, 5, 6, and
Mm-hmm.
it was absolutely a reaction. Couldn't really tell you where it came from in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have more understanding now as an adult, but yeah, I think you're right on point.
So
Hmm.
do you have siblings? Did you have siblings, older siblings? And so because usually something that's like that starts with an older sibling or
Hmm.
for being chided for a younger one that you were responsible for. Which one is it for you?
I'm the oldest. I have one younger brother. He's 4 years
Mm.
younger.
Okay, so he's 4 years younger, and so you were responsible as an older person for
Yeah,
him. Now, I mean,
for his emotional well-being, pretty much. Yeah.
mhm. So
Yeah.
so now let's go back. You tapped into age 5, between 5 and 6.
Hmm.
Um, talk to me about what you recall. Now you understand you may not have full cognizant recall, full intellectual recall, but you do have emotional recall. So let's talk about that.
Hmm. Sure. Just from the happenings you mean around that age?
Yes,
Or
like you say,
sure,
you remember this panic attack thing coming on you. So,
sure,
well,
sure.
let's see if you can remember the day or this incident that made you feel that type of internal discomfort.
Sure. Yeah, I believe I can point to much of the source. Some of it, I was told about certain activities, but they make sense.
Mhm.
And it's almost like weird flashbacks type of thing. I was molested at a young age, 4 to 5, maybe not quite a year. And then there was abuse in the home, as well, physical. At the time, definitely emotional. My parents' marriage at the time was very turbulent.
Mhm.
And because of the mixture of everything going on at one time, like I would just scream at night,
Mhm.
and so
Mhm.
the response to that was not one of comfort or reassurance. It was lock you in the basement
Mhm.
and let you scream it out in the dark, type of thing. So in that specific activity, I don't remember in the moment. I know it happened, but that was something that my mother had to tell me was what was done, and obviously I believe her. She was
Mhm.
there, but it makes sense. There are certain events that I remember more than others, and there's more questions than facts in my head
Mhm.
a lot of the times. I know what my alarms were, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
around my father and my parent. It is just so it was very tumultuous early on. And so it was very tumultuous probably up until I got on my own, to be
Yeah.
quite honest.
But
So, and even
and it's
after.
showing. I mean,
So,
I'm looking at even age 21, 22,
yep,
25. I'm looking
absolutely.
at this thing just carried you
Mhm,
on through. But I want to say
mhm,
something. So let's go back. You're telling me that you were molested as
mhm.
a toddler. Are we understanding that correctly?
Yeah, about 4 years
Well,
old, 5,
okay.
4.
And was
Yeah.
that a family member, dad, brother? Well, I mean, obviously you didn't have a brother. So dad, cousin, was that a relative?
It was not, as a neighbor's daughter, older
Okay.
daughter. And then there was question as to whether or not my father, and I
Mm-hmm.
know that sounds weird, but there was question, and there's more probability than not, but I don't recall that. I don't recall
Okay.
that. So there's no
So the
surety there.
questions came from what? Mom? Like, did mom tell you this?
She would, but then there would be these intuitions that I would get as a young
Okay.
child.
All right.
I did not want to leave my brother alone with him.
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to leave my mother alone with him, and I was too young to understand any of the situation. So it could have just been fear from the relationship, but I think because of what was going on in my life, my own little life at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember him seeing certain things that would make me question, why didn't you stop
Mm-hmm.
this?
Mm-hmm.
So unless you were part of it. So
Well,
it's,
yeah. Hmm. And we could dig into that a lot, but one of the things that I feel is that by the time you're 8, you've become an obstinate child.
mhm,
That's what I sense. Because your defenses, you don't know who you can trust. Nobody was there to defend you, and it comes down to, well, I'm going to take care of myself. I am impressed with the fact that you said you were sent in the basement to scream it out, because what I see around you is a lot of isolation to hide yourself. A lot of like, for you, tight spaces were safe. Nobody could get in there with you. And so when you did not know what to do, you because of how you were trained, you had certain hiding places, certain places that you could turn to, first physically as a kid, but then emotionally as an adult. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay.
Do you remember having hiding places, or places that you love to get alone and to be isolated, or at least separated?
I loved to, I'm trying to recall. Like, I was very content playing with others or myself. But yeah, there was like certain, almost like places in my mind, that you could just kind of run to. Sometimes, I'm trying to recall. Sometimes it was just playing with my light bright in my closet. It was just like to be there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was very social as a child, so I didn't like a whole lot of forced to be alone if I didn't have to be. But yeah, I certainly had safe places to go to, even in my mind. So
when you had those moments of being sent to the basement, how frequent was that? Was that once or twice, or was that kind of regular, a little bit routine? How did that work for you?
I honestly don't know. I don't know. At least once. I don't know if it happened multiple times. I don't know.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking, because I'm working through whether or not we're dealing with the soul vow, a defense vow, where you're just deciding you have this amazing defense mechanism that prevents people from even thinking about breaching your boundaries. And it seems like you're very firm about them, and some of them are a bit irrational, because they are more instinctual and impulsive than they are provoked. So in other words, in order for me not to go through this again, I set up this boundary. I don't care who it is. I don't care what the reason is. I'm setting up this boundary. For example, you mentioned your mom. What type of boundary, or your family? Let's start with your mom. What type of boundary do you have for your mom? And what provoked you to establish a boundary that she can't cross?
With my mother, there were none. There were no boundaries. And I didn't realize that was part of what was hurting me throughout life. I lived in a defensive but very compliant manner when it came to her, because I knew her story and I felt responsible for her emotions. And I felt, I was privy to many things that children should not be privy to, especially concerning relationship, like their parents' relationships, too early. I don't think it was wrong that I know them, but it was certainly too early. So I became her confidant rather than her child. And so, but then that caused contention, because I was the child, but I was not acting like it. So, and that's still part of our contention today, even though we do have a relationship. So that's been my journey, probably the last, I guess really since I've moved to Joliet. I didn't grow up in Joliet, but when I moved down here, it was cultivation of an explosion between us. And so I think since that time, I've been learning what do healthy boundaries look like and trying to explore. There's been progress, but there's still question.